There are nights you expect to remember. Weddings, birthdays, the kind where you plan your outfit days in advance and take pictures you know you'll post later. Then there are nights that sneak up on you. Ordinary on the surface. No warning. No hint that everything in your life is about to shift. That party was the second kind. It was a company event. One of those quarterly celebration dinners my husband's office liked to throw to keep morale up. He worked in finance. Long hours, tight deadlines, too many calls. I stopped asking about the details years ago, but I always went to the parties. Out of habit. Out of duty. And maybe somewhere deep down, because I liked being seen on his arm. Liked pretending, for a few hours, that we still played the game of husband and wife. That night, I wore a dress I hadn't touched in a year. Dark green silk, low back, fitted just right. I remembered how Mark used to like it, how his eyes would linger a little longer. But when I walked into the living room, ready to leave, he barely looked up from his phone. "You look nice," he said. Nice, like a compliment thrown over the shoulder. The party was at a rooftop bar downtown. Tall windows, soft jazz, dim lighting, corporate elegance with just enough gloss. The room buzzed with conversations I didn't care about. Quarterly gains, new accounts, mergers. I smiled. I nodded. I sipped wine slowly. Mark drifted into a group of his colleagues, laughing in that way he did when he was performing. I stood by the bar alone but not uncomfortable. I'd perfected the art of being present and invisible at the same time. Then I felt him. Before I saw him, I felt the shift. The air around me changed. "Didn't think I'd see you here," came the voice beside me. I turned. It was Vincent Blake, Mark's boss. He was older than Mark by at least a decade. Salt and pepper hair, strong build, sharp suit that fit like it had been tailored just for him. He was the kind of man who carried power without speaking. The kind of man you notice even when you try not to. I smiled politely. I never miss an open bar. He chuckled, slow and low. Smart woman. I expected him to walk away, to nod and leave me to my glass of red. But he didn't. He stayed. "You've got a quiet confidence about you," he said. "Rare thing in a room like this." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that your way of saying I look bored?" "Not at all," he replied. "I'm saying you don't need any of this to shine." It was a line. I knew it. And yet, it didn't feel like one. Or maybe I wanted to believe that. He didn't flirt. Not exactly. But everything he said carried an undertone. A hum beneath the words. We talked about the city, travel, books. He asked about my work, or rather, why I didn't talk about it. I told him I'd put my career on hold after our second child. He nodded like he understood, like he saw something in that choice that even I had forgotten. And all the while, Mark never looked over. Never checked in. Never noticed. "You know," Vincent said, setting down his drink, "you have the kind of presence that doesn't need an introduction." I laughed softly. "You're full of lines tonight." He leaned in, voice dropping just enough. "I don't say things I don't mean." My breath caught. Just slightly. "I should get back to my husband," I said. "You should," he agreed. "But you won't." I stared at him, unsure whether to be offended or intrigued. "I meant," he added, more softly now, "you deserve more than being someone's background." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because deep down, I knew he was right. I excused myself a few minutes later, went to the bathroom, locked the stall, and I breathed. Not because I was afraid, but because I hadn't felt that alive in a very long time. When I came out, he was gone. Mark was still with his colleagues, laughing louder now. A little flushed, glass in hand. "Ready to head out?" he asked when I approached. I nodded. "Yeah." On the ride home, he scrolled his phone the entire time. Didn't ask how my night was. Didn't notice that I hadn't said a word since we left. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I played back every moment. Every sentence. Every glance. It wasn't that I wanted Vincent. It was that he saw me. And suddenly, I couldn't unsee the parts of myself that had been ignored for far too long. The next morning, everything looked the same sunlight falling through the kitchen blinds, the same clatter of breakfast dishes, the same mechanical, have a good day kiss from Mark before he grabbed his briefcase and headed out the door, but I knew better now. I knew that inside me, something had been disturbed, something that no longer fit neatly within the careful routine I had built over years of duty, compromise, and silence. He had whispered to me, and it was like a door inside my chest had opened that I hadn't even known was locked. And now, nothing felt the same. I spent the following days moving through my life like someone half awake. I answered emails, managed the kids' schedules, coordinated dinners, and smiled at the right moments, but everything around me felt muffled, like I was watching myself from behind glass. That whisper, that look in Vincent's eyes, replayed in my mind every time I paused long enough to let my thoughts drift. By Thursday, I was carrying the weight of it in my chest, a restlessness, a longing I couldn't name, a sharp contrast between how I felt in his presence and the emptiness that followed me through every room in my house. I didn't want to cheat. I wasn't planning on breaking vows. But I couldn't pretend that something fundamental hadn't been awakened in me, a hunger, not for Vincent specifically, but for how I had felt when he looked at me like I still mattered. That weekend, Mark barely looked up from his laptop. We passed each other like shadows, polite, practiced, distant. I made a casserole he barely tasted. I asked about his work, and he mumbled something about a client, then excused himself to take a call. When I asked if he wanted to go for a walk or maybe out to dinner, he sighed, told me he had too much on his plate, and promised, maybe next weekend. But I had heard that promise before. It never arrived. So instead, I let my fingers linger over Vincent's name in my phone, just once, just a moment too long. And then I messaged him. We met in a quiet cafe tucked between office buildings, the kind of place where no one looks twice at anyone. He was already there, sitting in the corner, looking calm, unreadable. I slid into the seat across from him, unsure if I'd even speak once I arrived. But when he looked at me, not past me, not through me, but at me, something inside me softened, like I had been holding my breath for far too long, and finally exhaled. He didn't push. He didn't flirt. He just asked how I was. And before I knew it, I was talking. Really talking. About the small things, the big things, the empty spaces in between. I told him about the quiet ache in my chest, the loneliness that wore my name like a second skin, the way I felt invisible even while standing next to the man I married. Vincent listened. No interruptions. No advice. Just presence. And when he reached across the table to touch my hand, just lightly, I didn't move away. Because for the first time in a long time, someone was reaching for me, not because they needed something, not because it was expected, but because they wanted to. I met him again the next week. And then the next. We didn't kiss. We didn't even hold hands beyond that first cafe touch. But the intimacy was real, undeniable. It lived in our conversations, our silences, the way he looked at me like I was whole. And every time I came home, I found it harder to slip back into my role, harder to pretend that Mark and I were anything more than two people sharing a house and a history. The night I came home from one of those coffee meetings and Mark said, "You seem happier lately," I felt a sharp twist of guilt in my chest. He smiled, proud of himself for noticing. I nodded, pretending that it was his attention that made me glow. But I knew better. And I think, deep down, so did he. The night it finally happened, the night everything broke, was nothing spectacular. No storm, no fight, no dramatic confrontation. Just another company event. Another rooftop. The city spread out beneath us, cold and glittering. Mark disappeared into his usual crowd, laughing with clients, checking his watch, sipping from a glass he never offered to refill for me. I stood alone near the balcony, staring out into the dark. And then he was there. Vincent. Not saying anything. Just standing beside me, steady and warm. He looked at me for a long time. And then he leaned in, his voice a whisper barely louder than the wind. "You deserve to be chosen. Every day. Not out of habit, but because someone sees you. All of you." And in that moment, in that one unbearable second, I broke. Because I had spent so many years pretending I didn't need to be chosen anymore. I turned to him. He didn't move. He didn't pressure. He just waited. And I let myself take the step forward. His apartment was clean, quiet, understated. I stood by the window while he poured wine, both of us pretending it wasn't already inevitable. When he came over, he didn't touch me right away. He looked at me. "Are you sure?" he asked. I nodded, not because I had made some final decision, but because in that moment, I wanted to stop carrying the weight of being untouched. The kiss was soft, not rushed, not urgent, but it was real. And when we finally touched, truly touched, it wasn't about betrayal. It wasn't about desire. It was about remembering who I was underneath the years of being taken for granted. And for one night, I let myself feel everything I'd buried. We didn't become something after that. Vincent didn't ask for more. And I didn't offer it. It wasn't love. It wasn't the start of a new chapter. It was a reckoning. A mirror. And in that mirror, I saw a woman who had forgotten what it felt like to be looked at and truly seen. I didn't leave Mark the next day, or the one after, but I started to live differently. I demanded more. I spoke up. I remembered my name. And I will never forget the man who, with one whispered sentence, reminded me that I was still in there, waiting to be claimed not by someone else, but by myself.